I want to thank you for watching this longer version of how the GOP can win back the White House. I hope that you like the ideas that are included here and think that they have some merit. I think that it's unlikely that if John McCain or Mitt Romney had won the presidency, that we would have decided as a country to make overhaul of our healthcare system our #1 priority. Who's in the White House does make a difference. It's the president that sets the tone for the nation and sets its priorities. You may be wondering, well, who is this guy really? Well, I'm a lifelong Republican. I voted for 12 Republicans in the 13 presidential elections during my voting lifetime. I'm a businessman. I've focused on turnarounds, that is, turning losers into winners. I'm a pragmatist. I try to make fact-supported decisions, and I really hate losing. I admit to being a rhino, that is, a Republican intent on no oblivion. It seems to me that if we don't change our course, our party is headed in the wrong direction. In the last 6 elections, we've won the popular vote only one time, and that was by a very slim majority. That trend is very different from what happened in the previous 6 presidential elections, in which we won 5 out of 6. It is true that we've done pretty well in the off-year elections, when only the party stalwarts seem to show up to vote. But in presidential elections, where massive numbers of independents and unaffiliated voters also vote, our trend is not very positive. This slide really shows what our problem is. There are 72 million registered Democrats across the country, and only 55 million registered Republicans. There are 44 million independents or unaffiliated voters. And this independent and unaffiliated group is the only group of the 3 that's growing. And so it's easy to see that if both parties turn out the same amount of party loyalists, we will continue to lose elections. The numbers are not in our favor. In November of 2013, there was a study that was published by Esquire magazine, which was jointly done by a group called Public Opinion Strategies, which was a Romney group, and Benson Strategy Group, which was an Obama group. They surveyed Americans and tried to put us into different categories based on our view on issues. Their findings show that just under 20% of the country call themselves liberals, and they agree that that's where they fit, and about 25% call themselves conservatives. The vast majority of us, almost 60%, identify ourselves as being in the middle. And so it's interesting to see what this group in the middle really believes. First of all, they're very dissatisfied with the way things are going. They're unhappy. They tend to trust Democrats somewhat more than Republicans. They don't want to discuss God and guns. They think government should only help the very needy and leave the rest of us alone. They believe that we're not the world's keeper, that government should spend less, that we need less regulation, and among this group, more taxes for the rich and for polluters is okay with them. The next few slides represent information gathered by the Roper Center for Public Opinion. They have all this data in archives, and they have been collecting data during presidential elections for many years. On the left, under number 1, really represents the time period when Jimmy Carter was elected president, and number 10, the most current election. So this represents data points over the last 10 presidential elections. Here you see the data of the makeup of the voter population by political philosophy. And what's clear is that this philosophy hasn't really changed much over the years. The lines are pretty straight. The purple line is moderates, and that has been the top, the most populous group for all these years. Conservatives in the middle group, and liberals in the bottom group. What you can see there is a convergence of the three starting to happen. This Roper slide represents the same time period from Carter through the most recent election, and you can see that the party makeup, unlike the philosophy, has changed over the years. You can see at one point where the Republican number was the dominant, and the Republican Party, that was the highest number, and that was during the Reagan years. However, you can see that the red line has not been at the top since that particular time. What you can also see is that the bottom line, which is independents, is gradually rising and moving closer to the two political parties. This Roper slide shows Republican support from independents. You can see the big bubble on the left during the Reagan years, where independents seem to be supporting us at record levels, and you can see the slippage during the Ross Perot campaign, and where we lost, and Bob Dole's campaign, where again we suffered from lack of support from independents. You can also see that Romney did win the independent vote, only slightly, but he did achieve a win where McCain really did not. This Roper slide shows Republican support by individuals who called themselves moderates in the polling. Again, you can see that we did quite well in the early years, but have not done well at all over the last several years. Not since the Bush lost to Clinton have we really done well in gaining the support of moderates. This Roper slide shows our support from women. Again, during the Reagan years, we had a good support from women, and we won, and then it slipped down below the line, and it has been very difficult for us to get support among women for actually the last almost 30 years. This Roper slide shows the population of voters. The magenta line there is women, and the black line is men. And I think this slide, along with the previous slide that shows that we are not supported by women, and this slide, which shows that now almost 54% of the voters in presidential elections are women, proves that we will not win the presidency again until we figure out a way to win the women's vote. This Roper slide shows our support by race. Not surprisingly, whites have supported the Republican Party pretty consistently over the years, although you see a big dip in 1992, and that was the support for Ross Perot. African Americans have never really supported our party to any great degree. In the center line, you can see Hispanics, and you can see the one big bubble that was during the Bush years, but it has fallen severely since then. This is the last slide of the Roper slides, and it shows the population, voter population by race. The red line, of course, is white voters, and you see that it is diminishing, and that magenta line is the total of all non-white groups. And you can see that it is rising, and it's not too hard to visualize that somewhere out in the not too distant future, these two lines will cross. And this also shows some of the demographics that are causing us to have difficulty in winning presidential elections. I'd like to visualize with you, if you will, that you and I are standing on this platform out in the ocean. And when the platform begins to burn, I'm sure that both of us would run over to the edge and we would contemplate jumping into the water to save ourselves from the flames. But if we're like most human beings, we would hesitate. We would notice that it's a long way down to the water. The water's cold, and it contains a lot of unknown creatures that might be perilous to our health. And so we would hesitate, and we would stay in the relative safety of the burning platform. That is until it finally became obvious to us that as the platform begins to burn more and more, the only way that we have a chance of surviving would be to jump off of the platform into the ocean. And that's the way we all make decisions about change. We don't change until we're absolutely required to do so. I also have the picture of Albert Einstein on this slide to remind us that his definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over while expecting different results. Before we start to discuss a winning strategy, let's stop and agree on our core GOP beliefs. I think we all agree in a smaller government, free market solutions. We want strong national defense. We know that we have to have that big stick. We want more power to the states. In other words, the solutions, most solutions, should be made locally. We want responsible spending, a balanced budget. Wow, what a concept. Freedom from overregulation. Let's empower people. Let's not restrict innovation. So I think we must honor these core beliefs, or winning won't have any meaning whatsoever. So, with our core beliefs firmly in mind, I propose that we put 4 things on our winning to-do list. Obviously, we need to get more votes than Democrats, and that means broadening our base of support. But how? Here are the 4 initiatives. Number 1, develop a winning theme. Number 2, and I think it's important that we get these in the right order, the theme comes first, and then select a candidate with broad middle-class support and popularity who believes fervently in the theme. Number 3, demonstrate our focus on problem solving over politics. And 4th on our to-do list is to recast our Republican image. So let's first talk about developing a winning theme. We must find a theme that resonates with the 55% who call themselves the middle in the Esquire survey, not just the 25% who call themselves conservative. I think that it was this lack of theme last time that kept us from winning the White House. So this time we must find this middle group's hot button. So I suggest that we look at some of the data that we have at our fingertips to see if we can't come up with this theme. One set of data, I think, indicates that this administration may be incapable of running the government. And I think a lot of Americans would agree as they look at Fast and Furious, the IRS targeting, Benghazi, the GSA excesses, the failure of the green contractors, the Justice Department spying on the Associated Press, the Defense Department, which has a massive sexual harassment problem, the whole healthcare rollout. You can keep your doctor in all of those issues. This slide points to why the current administration seems incapable. It has the lowest percent of private sector experience of any administration in modern times. Here you see the average presidential approval ratings of presidents since President Eisenhower. And my reason for putting these up here is to make the point that whenever the average approval rating of a president gets too low, the voters are willing to make a change. You can see that President Nixon, Ford, Carter, Bush, and Obama, those are all low points in presidential ratings, and in each case, the voters made a change. The president's rating may be low at just under 50%, but the ratings of both parties are even lower, and ours is the lowest of the two parties. We stand at about 28%, while the rating of the Democrats is 43%. So we have a lot of work to do to bring up our status in the minds of American voters. This is a depressing slide, and I think that it indicates that the American dream is fading for the middle class. The slide on the left depicts the income of Americans since 1979. And you can see that the bottom fifth and the middle fifth, and really even the highest fifth of our country has not gained much in income. In fact, the average income of middle Americans is down since the Reagan election. The slide on the right depicts the cost of education. And you can see that it is escalating beyond the reach of most Americans. So while Americans' income has not increased, the cost of education, which is the vehicle that people use to get to the next level in their growth, is going up dramatically. So these two slides together really show that the American dream is slipping away for millions of Americans. This slide really shows that the economy just isn't providing the necessary jobs. The dark blue are the job openings, and the light blue are the number of unemployed. Simply stated, the supply of workers greatly exceeds the demand for their services in every sector of the economy. So my rhetorical question here is, what theme is suggested by these data? I think that number one, They suggest a theme of country before party, a commitment to results, not just rhetoric. They suggest that our party should promise to bring in people with experience and a record of success. We will focus in a laser-like fashion on creating jobs while addressing our debt and working positively towards a healthcare solution. In other words, solving our country's most serious problems. But we must be specific, activity-based, and not just talk about tax policy. The average American really doesn't relate to tax policy. We must present new ideas and be for them, not just against the current administration. We must demonstrate a vision of being the party of new ideas and progress towards restoring the American dream for the middle class. Now that we have some ideas in mind what our theme might be, let's move on towards how we choose a candidate. I've given it a lot of thought. In fact, I've studied every presidential election since Eisenhower beat Stevenson. And I found that each successful candidate had two things in common. Number one, they were all more personally popular than their opponent. Eisenhower was more popular than Stevenson, Kennedy more popular than Nixon, and so forth. And as you move down through the list, there's only a couple of exceptions, maybe Gerald Ford, who was very popular, but lost the election because he pardoned Nixon. And also President Bush Sr. was very popular, but he lost the election because of the candidacy of Ross Perot. So with a couple of exceptions, it's pretty obvious that personal popularity is a very important criteria for choosing a candidate. Secondly, I've noticed that all of the winners ran on a strong vision for America. They put forth during their campaign a vision. Whether we like it or not, Hope and Change was an example of a vision that caught people's attention, and it won their votes. So my strong suggestion here is that we find a candidate that is more personally popular than his or her opponent and who can articulate a vision for America. Our candidate has to have broad support and certainly has to be able to personify the theme in addition to having personal popularity. So if our theme is around competency and a focus on restoring middle-class hope via job growth, what does that indicate? Well, I think it indicates a candidate with a strong record of achievement. No more on-the-job training candidates. Governors, not legislators. A strong populist appeal. Someone the common guy can accept. A nice guy who fights for everyday folks. And a record of doing what's right. Pragmatism over ideological stances. Someone who's not in any way tainted with the label of the party of no. The third item on our to-do list is to focus our energy on the nation's problems, not politics. I believe that a singular focus on Obamacare is very risky. Half the country likes some of its provisions, eliminating pre-existing conditions and several others that are very popular. Most people are unaffected by Obamacare. And everyone believes that health care changes are necessary. So while it's okay to make this one of our campaign items, to focus on it with a singular focus, I believe, is pretty risky. Instead, why not announce a bipartisan commission that will focus on the goals of more coverage and cost reduction, fixing the problems as they become evident? And of course, this focusing our energy on problems includes the number one problem in the nation, which is jobs. Suggest that we campaign on a singular focus of creating jobs, and that this be led by someone with a superior business background and no political aspirations, and that this become the center point of our campaign. On debt reduction, let's get something done. Let's recommit to Simpson-Bowles principles, that is, give and take and negotiating. Let's make Paul Ryan, our budget chief, tasked with coming up with a big agreement which will begin to address our debt and our entitlement crisis. And finally, our fourth to-do list item, to recast our Republican image. The RNC's own findings show that the GOP is seen as narrow-minded, out of touch, a party of old men, insensitive. We don't care about people, we're non-inclusive, and our message is either weak or non-existent. I would ask, what does GOP stand for in the minds of many voters? I think the G stands for giant. We stand for big business, big Wall Street, big salaries for CEOs, big bailouts. Certainly not the little guy. And the O most certainly stands for old. We seem to be looking backward. And P stands for parent. Like a parent, we seem to be telling, especially young voters, what to believe as it relates to abortion, gay marriage, and other social issues. And it's this identity that's been causing us to lose elections in presidential election years, especially among independents and non-affiliated voters. So you may be wondering, where does this image come from? Well, it comes from where most Americans get their view of America, from the television set. And I think this slide might surprise some of you. We all watch Fox News and we hear them brag about their viewership. And it is much bigger than MSNBC and CNN. But NBC, ABC, and CBS still have huge domination in terms of market share over cable news networks. And this isn't even a fair comparison, because I took the four programs at Fox News and MSNBC and CNN that are around the news hour and compared them with one 30-minute period on the networks. So this chart shows that most Americans get their news from the three networks. It's hard to change an image. The old saying, a first impression is hard to change, is still true. Choosing the right message and focusing on specific steps to bring it to reality will change our image. Choosing the right candidate and avoiding a protracted debate agenda will change our image. We should urge our senators and representatives to work for solutions and stop block voting no for everything that comes up. That'll help our image. And lastly, I suggest that we stop circulating the negative, hateful, and preposterous emails that we all get on a daily basis. They eventually end up in the mailboxes of independents who roll their eyes and see us as extremists. And so I'll end this with a question for my most conservative friends. What will advance conservative ideas more? Winning back the White House with someone not as conservative as you might wish, or having the alternative, 8 more years of the Democrats in the White House? I thank you for watching this presentation. I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm a political novice, but my goal here is to start a conversation that can lead us back to the White House. Thanks for listening.